Good evening and welcome to your Hurricane edition of the RO Sports Show, brought to you by First Health Orthopedics. Of course, the hurricane is upon us, but that doesn't stop us from having the RO Sports Show. So, Coach Brian Till from the Varsity Richmond Raider football team, we appreciate you joining us again.
Glad to be here.
Now, obviously, last week's win was pretty big, especially for the program, beating number 4 Butler at their house 30-19. I know that last week you had made a statement that that you needed a big win to make a statement.
Right.
Did you guys make that statement this week?
I think so. I mean, the win wasn't so much a statement for everybody else as to our kids and where they've come from and what they believe they can do. It's one thing to talk about beating a program like that and then be able to go out and do it. And our kids just really responded really well to everything we put in front of them last week, and we're really proud of how they played.
Now, looking at the game specifically, Caleb had another good game, but one thing that I've noticed that he's done throughout the season so far is really spread the ball out. So how have you guys been able to do that so effectively?
Well, I mean, really it's because our receivers are working so hard, play in and play out, and there's a different guy open. And so Caleb's able to read that and to get the ball to whoever is open. And those guys are working very consistently on the perimeter, whether you're talking about Jordan Wall, Bobby Terry, Jacoby Baldwin, Preston Coker, and Dalton Stroman. There's 5 guys here, and even when Bobby goes in the backfield, when you have John Jones come in, all those guys can do things, and they're working when they're out there. They're working really hard, so that makes it easier for Caleb to spread the ball around.
And then I guess on the defensive side, you guys were very stout, especially in the second and third quarters. It seemed like the defense was in the backfield every play. Right. So how were you guys able to do that on defense?
Well, I think it's, again, winning individual battles, individual effort, within the scheme. Guys are fitting within their gaps, doing what they're supposed to, but they're winning one-on-one battles, whether you're talking about defensive end and an offensive tackle, you're talking about a linebacker and a guard, on a blitz. Those guys are winning those battles, and then being able to pursue the quarterback. And he doesn't really have anywhere to go because they're filling their gaps responsibly there. And really was frustrated with the first 2 touchdowns because we didn't do that. They busted plays on us on those 2 touchdowns. And so when we were really sound up front in those gaps early on or throughout the game, that's when we played great defense. And our effort takes us then to the next level. And that's something we really pride ourselves. We break it down all the time on run and hit, our pursuit, our effort of all 11 guys getting to the ball. So you put that together with good sound defense. Now guys are running to the football. You're going to make a lot of plays on D.
And it seems like this Raider team is relatively young. Hasn't seemed to really matter. But talk about how important it is for a lot of these sophomores like Caleb, like Baldwin on the outside, to step up for the program.
Well, Caleb, he's probably the only one who you can't really truly say is a sophomore from the standpoint he has a full year. Yeah. But the rest of those guys, I think maybe even Caleb's success has given them comfort. They play with him. CJ, we brought him up. He played some varsity snaps last year on the defensive side of the ball. Dalton and Jacoby are able to be, comfortable because they played with Caleb, prior to this. They, that comfort level allows them to lay. And now that they have played, the sophomores kind of starts growing out of them, and the experience is making them older than really what their age in school is.
So, done with the non-conference schedule now, and we're going to talk about moving forward into the SEC part of the schedule. But looking back now, are you satisfied with how your guys played throughout the non-conference portion?
I mean, for the most part, obviously, the loss at Wake Forest still stings a little bit when you look at it. You feel like you're better than that. It's not that necessarily should have won or should have this, but just the fact we allowed 49 points. We did play well in the third quarter, but there's some things we feel like we left undone there. That would be the only thing I would look at and say, okay, a little frustrated with. Overall, though, what I really like is where we came from the beginning of the non-conference to where we are at the end of the non-conference, and that's really the big deal: is are we progressing? Are we continuing to get better? And we've got to continue to get better through the conference. We haven't won the conference in 8 years, and so that's something that's a point of pride for us. Is that all right? Now it's that's the next challenge. Let's get better through that and be headed into the playoffs playing the way we want to play.
Absolutely. Now, looking forward, obviously the bye is this week, which coincidentally works out pretty well with the hurricane coming.
Really well.
I don't know.
We stay prayed up. Prayed up.
I don't know if this is something that you've had to deal with as a head coach, but how is the hurricane going to affect preparing, even though the bye week is this week?
Well, as long as we have power, our preparation via video stays pretty much the same. And with it being a bye week, we don't usually focus on our opponent in the bye week as much. We'll have a few wrinkles that we see that they're going to do if we have film on them. But what we focus more on is our adjustments, our fundamentals again. So we miss some of that fundamental work this week. We got a practice in yesterday, and now we're going to miss the practice the rest of the week. So we watched an hour's worth of film on Monday, stuff we haven't been able to watch with our guys of us, not of our opponent. So we got a couple of good days of prep in. Next week, depending on how all the weather goes, if it goes and we have a normal prep week, it won't really be any different. If the hurricane and the weather, via flooding, via whatever, puts us out of school Monday or Tuesday, then it's going to shorten our prep, and we'll have to adjust then. But the good thing is, game planning wise, right now we have power. We've already exchanged film with Purnell Sweat, so we can use the next 48 hours to really do all of our prep that we would normally get done on a weekend. So that's helpful from that standpoint.
And, of course, a lot of things are up in the air with the weather, the hurricane. But finally, Coach, looking towards Purnell Sweat, obviously going to finish the season with 7 straight conference opponents. Right. What are you guys looking towards as far as preparing for Purnell Sweat? Because no offense to that program, but usually they're towards the bottom of the SAC. But nonetheless, no team should be overlooked in the conference, right?
Well, they have some really good football players. I mean, Chandler Prayboy I think he's committed to Elon as a wide receiver, safety, running back. The kid, I think he can punt and throw the ball.
Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, he is. And he plays baseball. He can throw. I wouldn't be surprised to see him. Things like a tall sweep or a jet sweep pass or something, because the kid can do that kind of stuff. And so, you got to be prepared for all those things. You don't know where that guy's going to line up. Coach Sherman does a great job of moving him around so that you can't just say, okay, this is where this guy is. This is the matchup we're going to work. Instead, we got to really work our awareness of where he is. He's able to be all over the field. So that's the big thing when we're preparing for him is scheme-wise, understanding that. Also understanding what we have to do on offense, continue to get better. Defensively, he's playing at safety too now. They've got 3 or 4 guys going both ways that I've seen on film. It looks like in the last couple of days, and I've looked at film with them. And so knowing where those guys are, they're obviously good football players that play on both sides of the ball. So, we continue to preach, and our kids are really starting to preach it to each other that we have a standard of play. And it doesn't matter, where your opponent fits. That's the thing about the SAC. You can get beat any week because it's quality every week. Purnell Sweat's usually, like you said, they're traditionally in that bottom half of our conference, but they're 2-1 right now. Right. Last year we played them, they were 3-0, and there's a reason, because teams that they're playing out of our conference, they're beating those teams. So week in and week out, you don't play well, your opponent plays well. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, you got to. I said this to the boys last week. It's one of the things I've really picked up, and I really like it. And I'm not necessarily a Saban disciple, but I heard him say this a while back. It's just really, the game takes what it takes. It doesn't matter who your opponent is.
Right.
The physical nature of the game takes what it takes. And so you're going to either give it what it takes, or it's going to take it back from you.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. The SEC is a tough conference, and we see that, like you mentioned, outside of the conference in those games that they win. And then every week's going to be a battle. So enjoy the week off, even though it's going to be a hurricane-filled week. Lots of rain. Of course, we hope everyone out there stays safe. Yeah. Really appreciate you joining us again, Coach.
Yeah, we hope everybody will stay safe. All our boys and everybody take care out there.
All right, we appreciate it. When we come back, we're going to continue our Raider Talk. With Dion's going to be joining us, talking about the Butler game. Looking forward to SAC play, plus college football, NFL, plenty more to talk about when we come back to the RO Sports Show.
At Richmond Community College, we can prepare you for a high-skill, high-paying career in a variety of fields. From business to education, engineering, utilities, healthcare, criminal justice, information technology, and human services. At Richmond Community College, we can save you thousands of dollars on tuition through our university transfer programs that provide a seamless transition to universities and colleges throughout North Carolina. At Richmond Community College, we are always developing new courses and programs in response to the communities we serve. We offer day, evening, and online courses, and you can now complete 5 curriculum programs entirely online. At Richmond Community College, we believe in helping you prepare for a better life. Richmond Community College. Local college, big impact.
McNair Auto Sales is the place to buy your pre-owned car, truck, or van. To be the best, it takes big selection, friendly staff, and great pricing. We guarantee a no-hassle buying experience, and financing is available right on site. So come see us today. We're located at 1026 East Broad Avenue in Rockingham. And remember, with over 40 years of experience, you know McNair is the name you can trust.
Welcome back to the RO Sports Show, brought to you by First Health Orthopedics. We, of course, appreciate head coach Brian Till for joining us in the studio to talk Raider football, and we're going to continue that, as I mentioned before the break, with RO Sports contributor Dion Cranford. We appreciate you joining us as usual.
Yes, sir.
Now, we were talking to him about the Butler win, which was huge. Obviously, going there, us coming in as number 6, them as number 4. So let's just jump right into it. What impressed you the most out of Richmond's performance Friday?
Well, I mean, I think the big surprise factor was Richmond's defense. I'm sure that's been talked about by several folks because I mean, I don't know that a lot of people were expecting the Raider defense to really go in there and shut them down, especially like they did in the second half. I know their quarterback actually ended up with negative 31 yards. He actually lost 51 yards in that second half.
Wow.
To erase the 20 or 30 yards he had gained. So the Raider defense just shut them down, after about the first quarter. So
Yeah, and I know as I was talking to Coach Till, it seemed like, especially in the second and third quarter, the Raiders were in their backfield every play, it felt like.
Oh yeah, every play. But another thing that really jumped out at me, I guess, and I don't want to take away from the offense because the offense did fantastic, but I guess we're kind of getting used to that.
Right.
So something else that really jumped out at me was special teams. The punting game played a big factor in that. Field position was just key in that win. And then, of course, I mentioned somebody, we had the field goal at the beginning of the game. Mm-hmm. It was a 3-point difference at halftime, so, you got to look at a lot of those things. But I did want to mention something about when I was talking about field position. I was actually looking over, making some notes of everything. And Butler started at or behind the 30, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 10 out of 12 possessions.
Wow.
Behind their own 30. So, I mean, Richmond kept them deep in their territory, whereas Richmond, on the other hand, was around midfield on about 10 of their 12 possessions. About 8 of their 12, and then a couple more around their own 30 or 40. So, and then on one possession they actually started in Butler two actually they started in Butler territory. So it was a big difference, and that was key. And then the last I didn't realize it because it had split the halves, but Richmond actually scored on 4 straight possessions. And a lot of that had to do with the field position. All those were very short field positions.
So, we talked about the defense. Let's talk about the offense for a second. And
Okay.
obviously, Hood had a good game. And a trend that we're seeing is that he's been able to spread the ball around. And Coach Till mentioned earlier that, it's the ability to have all these weapons around him that gives him the opportunity to do that. But being a sophomore, he doesn't play like one, does he?
Well, and he doesn't, but you also got to think he's throwing to sophomores. Jacoby Baldwin, sophomore. Dalton Stroman, I believe, is also a sophomore. And they had 2 of the biggest catches in the game, and neither one of them I can still believe they called it. I mean, it was just amazing. We've talked about Jacoby Baldwin before. I've enjoyed watching him since that Reagan game. But that catch that Stroman made in stride, I got him 2 for 56 yards. I think the catch he made was around 44 yards to set up that score there in, I believe, the third quarter to take the lead. I mean, it was just unreal. And then, of course, Jacoby Baldwin, he was covered, somehow made the catch and ran it in for a touchdown. So, also Bobby Terry, Jordan Wall, Preston Coker all caught passes in that game. So, yeah, he's got a lot of targets to throw to. And that's really impressive considering Malik Stanback's not on the field.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Which would have given Caleb one more weapon, but nonetheless, it doesn't seem like they're skipping a beat. Also want to throw this out there. Quick shout-out and congratulations to Jacoby Baldwin, who is this week's official Richmond County Male Athlete of the Week for having that big game. Now, last week we reported from RO Sports that Coach Till was talking about how Richmond needed a, quote, big win to build up the confidence of his team, to make people know that this is a team that can contend for a state championship. Do you think their psyche is as high as it can be after this win?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I even joked with Coach Till Saturday. I was talking to them about how I was watching their attitude and the atmosphere on the sideline. I said, it's fun being in the stands and being a fan, but I said, without a doubt, the biggest fans at that game were on the sideline,
Right.
the coaches and players and watching them. I looked over at my dad at one point in the game and I said, that's worth the cost of admission right there, watching them. They were just down there cutting up and having a good old time. So, but what I like about this team, even when they went to Wake Forest, they're excited about the opportunity to play in those games.
Yeah.
I mean, they're excited about the opportunity, and you can tell they came in. And in this game, I mean, they just felt like they were going to win it from the beginning. I mean, you could just tell by their, it was theirs to lose, not.
Yeah, and I expect that confidence to continue climbing as we get into SAC play. Of course, this weekend they're on a bye, which turns out to be a blessing in disguise with Hurricane Florence bearing down on us. As of right now, Coach Till was mentioning that it's not really interrupting anything. They've already gotten some film time in. Of course, we'll know after the weekend whether flooding is going to be an issue or not. But, he says as of right now, things are on a go. So what do you expect them to be working on and expect to see from Purnell Sweat?
Well, unfortunately, a conference as a whole, I think it's a little bit down this year. Of course, Richmond's improved, but when you have a monster like Scotland's been the past few years and they fall back, it kind of does give that perception. So maybe it's just a little misleading because Scotland's struggling. Purnell Sweat, they're 2-1 right now. They haven't played the best schedule, but they did get slammed by Pine Forest. So when you compare opponents,
Right.
I'm not expecting too big of a game at Big Mo in a couple weeks. The big concern for me from Sweat's standpoint is they had a bye week last week. They were supposed to have a game actually today.
Right.
That is not going to happen because of the weather. So they're going to have had 2 weeks off. Plus, if they do get any kind of bad weather in the Pembroke area, you know how bad it is to flood.
Sure.
We don't know the condition that Big Mo Stadium may be in next week, if that game can even be played there. There's a lot of questions that aren't going to be answered until after the storm makes its way through here.
And you would know as well as anybody if there is a case. I mean, we saw it 2 years ago with Hurricane Matthew, and that area is completely flooded. Is it a possibility for them to come and play it here?
Yeah, actually, the year that Matthew hit, Lumberton did that.
Okay.
We were supposed to go to Lumberton, and they actually did play here. So that's actually a possibility. Like I said, we don't really know, and they are. I say they're more prepared. I guess they're more prepared after Matthew. They kind of know what to expect. There's actually a lot of evacuation going on in that area. We discussed that before filming. So I don't know. But I will say this, and I'm going to say this on the show. Chandler Brayboy, who plays for Purnell Sweat, he had all 3 of their touchdowns in their win over Bird. I got to give props to that kid. We saw him during baseball season. Fantastic kid. I got to speak to some of his family.
Just a straight athlete.
Yeah, he is just a straight athlete. If anybody can give Richmond any problems, it's him. But I don't see a lot more, coming from the Sweat side.
Well, and when you see teams like this where their focus point on offense is one player, I mean, it makes sense though. Wouldn't you just try to stop him and make the other parts of the team beat you?
Yeah, and that's why they're going to struggle.
Yeah.
The good news is they probably are a little bit better than last year, whereas teams like Hoke and Lumberton maybe have fallen back a little bit. So they might get some conference wins, and with their 2 wins they got in non-conference play, they might be playoff bound.
Very well could. And another thing that Coach Till was talking about, he mentioned Brayboy, said that looking at film, they line him up everywhere to the point where you could see him running the ball, throwing the ball, catching the ball. He plays defense as well. He said he lines up at safety sometimes. So he's just an athlete. And like you said, that's obviously going to be Richmond's number one priority if and when they play this game to stop him. So now, obviously with the bye coming this week, that means that Richmond will finish out the season with, 7 straight SAC games?
Yep.
So how do you think the best way is to navigate that? Because 71st seems to be improved this year. Of course, Scotland's going to be waiting there at the end of the season. So I guess what I'm asking is, how do you think we're going to end up at the end of the year?
Well, I think the challenge for Richmond at this point is having all those big games early, because they have Wake Forest, Pine Forest, and Butler, which I'm even giving Pine Forest credit because I think that was a big game too, kind of crammed together. If my expectations are right and other teams are kind of down a little bit, you're going to have Sweat, you're going to have Pinecrest, you're going to have Hoke, Jack Britt, and Lumberton. That's 5 kind of
should wins.
Yeah. And then this week's a bye. That's a long drought without any serious competition. Now, don't get me wrong, Pinecrest has got some athletes. They could step up and make a game of it. I just don't see it right now, but they could surprise us. But I don't know. It's scary because I'm worried that they're going to have that and then jump into 71st and
Get surprised a little bit.
Yeah,
I was going to ask
they got to stay focused and stay strong. And
yeah, with those strings of games against opponents that they are expected to win, could complacency set in perhaps?
well, it could. I mean, you look at what happened at Jack Britt last year.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody expected Richmond to lose to Jack Britt last
Right.
year. So I mean, so it is possible to step into a game like Pinecrest and get surprised. I don't think Sweat, Lumberton, Hoke will give us much of a challenge. They're kind of all in this rebuilding mode. Pinecrest maybe. Jack Britt's got a lot of injury issues, so I don't really see them being much of a challenge either.
All right, and then I guess my last question here, you're talking about moving towards the SAC, but looking back at the non-conference portion of Richmond's season, Coach Till said that he obviously they wanted to win at Wake Forest, but he's good with how they performed in the non-conference schedule. What's your opinion on it?
Overall non-conference?
Yeah, just this year, the first few games.
I've loved it. I've enjoyed it a lot. I mean, I was even happy with the Wake Forest performance. I mean, they've had their ups and downs, but you got to consider the youth and just the schedule coming out of that 3-1. I'm definitely impressed, and I'm thrilled with it. I think they've done a good job.
I agree, and it's expected to be a big year for Richmond. I mean, there was a lot of hype, a lot of anticipation coming forward.
It's an 8-year.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, it's an 8-year. I mean, look, the way I look at it is you want your team to go and play teams like Wake Forest because that experience will benefit you later down the road when you get into the playoffs, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to think the challenges they had at Wake Forest may have paid off in the Butler game. I mean, you just never know, but I think this team has a lot of potential. I love the improvements I've seen on defense. Everybody knows I'm a defensive guy, so I've really enjoyed the improvements on defense. I enjoyed the way they just swarmed and closed the gaps in that Butler game. I mean, it was really impressive. Matter of fact, they looked like Wake Forest in that game, to be honest with you. Those holes would open up on the Butler side, and they would just close right back. I mean, there was just nowhere to go. It was impressive.
And, I mean, Richmond put up 316 yards of total offense, 4 touchdowns by 3 different players. And real quick before we go to break, Butler actually outgained us yards-wise. But we made it into the end zone when it mattered,
But again, that goes back to the field position. Butler always had farther to go, so they're going to get more yards, if they're going to stay in the game. So.
All right. Well, there you go. Another one in the books for Richmond Raider football. Of course, as we just mentioned, it's a bye week this week. We'll continue to head into SAC play a week from tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll be able to get that game in, depending on what happens with Hurricane Florence. We appreciate you joining us, Dion, once again. We'll hope to see you as we continue throughout the season. Going to take another commercial break. When we come back, Russell Parker is going to join us on the desk to get into some college football, look at last week's picks, take a look at next week's picks, our big man on campus, so much more when we come back to the RO Sports Show. Hayden Construction has 2 new homes under construction at 2 distinct locations, 125 Crystal Court in Carolina Hills and on Robberdale School Road. Both feature incredible floor plans and distinct features inside and out. Hayden Construction, quality, value, and beauty. Call Jamie Smart at 910-331-5811 or Nicole Hayden at 910-995-0717 today to schedule an appointment. Exit Realty, making dreams a reality.
At Richmond County Hospice, we strive to provide high-quality care to our patients and their families. Whether it's the incredible hospitality at the Haven House or from the comfort of your own home, you can count on Hospice to be there for you. We also offer monthly grief support groups, and our chaplain will be there to hold your hand in prayer. Through our amazing staff and our volunteers, Hospice has made difficult times easier for our community. Call the number on your screen if you feel that you or your loved one may benefit from our services. Richmond County Hospice. Peace, comfort, dignity.
And welcome back to the RO Sports Show, brought to you by First Health Orthopedics. Ross regular Russell Parker joining the desk, and we're going to talk college football.
Yeah.
Now, I know what the first thing you're going to tell me about when we start getting into our picks. Of course, the UNC-ECU game.
Yeah.
So let's start right there, I guess.
Well, we stomped, I won't say stomped because at the beginning of the game, it was kind of either way to start off with. It was kind of tied up, very close with like 2 or 3 points of each other at the end of the first and second quarter. But by the second half, ECU just kind of carried away with it and just blew you guys out of the water.
Yeah, I'm not happy about it, obviously. I know last week you guys picked ECU. I picked the Tar Heels, of course, but I didn't do that just with my heart. I did it with my head because I kept thinking, all right, I know UNC didn't start out very well, but it's ECU. Like, they should have better athletes than the Pirates do. That just simply wasn't the case. What did the final score end up being? 41-19.
41-19, and ECU has beaten UNC the past 2 times they met prior to that game, so it shouldn't have been that big of a surprise that they won. They tend to be able to up one UNC and NC State whenever they play them. So, I feel like ECU is just always overlooked by the other schools in North Carolina. So, I think ECU is still a good program right now. They're still kind of mediocre. They've got obviously this win is going to be big for them. Maybe it will be more positive for them throughout the rest of the season. But they're not a terrible team. So.
Well, if ECU's mediocre, then what does that say about the Tar Heels program? Here's the silver lining. At least they didn't score 70 on us this time.
Yeah.
I suppose that's the right way to look at it.
And maybe this is the time where UNC says, hey, let's get rid of Larry Fedora.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that later on in the show because that's part of our Ross poll. But what do you think? As a Tar Heel fan, I don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction and just say, all right, fire the guy. But this is his 5th year, I think. These are all his guys. He was very successful early on in his career, but that was with guys that he didn't recruit.
Yeah.
The Marquise Williams at quarterback, your T.J. Logan, your Elijah Hood in the backfield, Bug Howard, Matt Collins, all those big wide receivers. Those were none of his guys. So I don't know that it's necessarily a knee-jerk reaction, so to speak, to say get rid of the guy. I just have to think at this point, if they continue to play this way, he won't make it through the season.
Well, look at last season. I think they finished bottom in the ACC. So, and now starting off 0-2 right now. Of course, they lost to California in the opening week at California. That could have been overlooked a little bit. But
sure.
when you're in state where you can have a lot of your fans there to begin with, and ECU, you should be able to win those type of games, but they just couldn't get it done.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I've already said this a couple of times this week. I think it's time to start looking towards basketball season because that'll be here before you know it. And I hate to say that because, as I mentioned, when Fedora started, Carolina was a good football team. There was a year where we played Clemson for the ACC championship, hung with them.
Mm-hmm.
So
even in playoff talks.
Yeah, for a little bit there, where we won 9 or 10 games in a row, and we were right there in it. Unfortunately, how the mighty have fallen, although I don't know if you could say mighty to begin with. But moving on last week's college picks, of course, Georgia and South Carolina, big SEC matchup in the SEC East. We all three picked the Bulldogs to win, and they won pretty handedly as well.
Yeah.
So that surprised you at all?
Not at all. You go into Columbia, it's a pretty loud area,
sure. But
Georgia, they've been in situations, they know how to get that stuff done. I couldn't see this game going the other way, no matter what.
I'm a little surprised that Georgia was able to go to Columbia and handle them like they did. I thought the Gamecocks might put up a little bit more of a fight because, people may not agree with me, but I thought South Carolina was, and still may be, one of those teams on the up and up in the SEC East. They've got some playmakers. Brentley, their quarterback's really good. They've got Debo Samuel, who's one of the best athletes in the country, kind of one of those do-it-all wide receiver, running back type of players. But Georgia, just too many athletes on the field, right?
Yeah, South Carolina, for me personally, I don't think they've really been there past couple of seasons. I don't think this was going to be the start of it. I think there was kind of a battle between these two who's going to win the East at one point, but I think now we've kind of understand now who's going to win that at this point.
Yeah. Speaking of the state of South Carolina, number 2 Clemson headed into College Station to take on the 12th man in Texas A&M, and this game was close.
Oh, yeah. I think there was a little controversy, too, with something to do with a touchdown. And I'm not quite sure what it was, but, there was a lot of controversy. So, I'm kind of surprised, not really surprised at how close that game got, though. I think Texas A&M is a strong team this season. So I think going forward, a lot of bigger teams like Alabama's gonna have to keep their eyes open for them because they could be the upset of the season for one of these guys. So
yeah, and the same way that Kirby Smart came to Georgia and immediately turned them around, perhaps the same thing for Jimbo Fisher at A&M.
Yeah,
they obviously have the facilities, they have the ability to recruit the athletes that they need to be a national champion. And playing teams like Clemson, who was already on that upper echelon, if you will, of college football, will do wonders for the A&M program. And I think Clemson knew going into that they were going to get a fight, especially on the road. Of course, they came out as the victor, which I'm glad for, being the ACC fan. I don't know if you were pulling for A&M or not, but
yeah, I went a little bit, but I like seeing these games get close like that. So
sure, and it was a good game in prime time. So Clemson came out the victor on that one. Going towards the West Coast, though, USC and Stanford, a big matchup in the Pac-12. Myself and Jeremy, we both picked the Trojans. You got the Stanford Cardinal right. I guess Bryce Love at running back and Costello at the quarterback was just too much for USC.
I think Stanford has always been a strong team. They just never had the ability to close out victories that often. So getting this win is going to be very, very good for them going forward. I think that they're going to be in the talks in the Pac-12 championship this season.
Sure.
They keep on this trend. So right now they're sitting pretty good.
And I think right now Stanford perhaps is in the driver's seat, even though it's still really early, but in the driver's seat for the Pac-12 championship because USC is now lost. They were ranked. They're still ranked, but towards the bottom half. Of course, Washington lost to Auburn first of the year. Now that's a non-conference, but still that's a loss in the column for Washington. So right now I think Stanford's in the driver's seat when it comes to moving forward and seeing how that plays out in the Pac-12. And then finally our picks for last week, another one involving some local teams. Appalachian State coming off that almost win over Penn State. Real close in overtime, but they pretty much thumped UNC Charlotte. As expected, we all picked App State.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that Appalachian State is a really good football program. They've shown they've made upsets over the main tier teams. So I think that they can, if they continue on this trend, I think they'll eventually be national champions of their division. So I think they keep on going like they are. They're going to be good.
Yeah, and I've talked before about how I think in the future, in the next decade, UNC Charlotte could be a prominent football school because of where they're located, the ability to recruit, the ability to have nice facilities, and all the stuff that comes with that. Well, let me ask you this: App State. Will we see a day where App State ends up in the ACC or the SEC, something like that? I mean, that program's been building ever since they beat Michigan 15 years ago.
Well, I think that the tiering system, how they do it with the AAA, AA, and A, I think it's kind of based on the size of the school itself, not really the football program. So they're probably going to be stuck down there unless App State gets a little bit bigger in terms of number of people going to the college, stuff like that. So, but I think that they're in the Sun Belt Conference right now. So I think they can eventually move on up and.
I see no reason why they couldn't, because before they joined the Sun Belt, they were actually a Division II team,
right?
And they've built themselves up to now they're in Division I. If they continue winning and being a dominant program and playing teams like Penn State and taking them to the limit, if down the line expansion happens again, the ACC may say, "Hey, let's bring in two teams." Guess what? App State's right here in the South, right here in North Carolina. ECU, another one of those teams perhaps that we could see. Central Florida, South Florida, a lot of those teams that they end up picking from some of these smaller conferences. So I find that kind of fascinating. Now, let's look at our locked-in picks for this week. Now, myself, family connection here, I picked Florida State over Samford, which I would have thought would have been a no-brainer. However, that one was kind of close. It scared me a little bit, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, I mean, Florida State, they're just, ever since last season, week 1, obviously what happened there with Alabama beat them. Ever since then, they've kind of been on this downtrend, and it's just gotten worse for them. I think it's because of the fact that they got rid of Jimbo Fisher. I mean, getting rid of him, it's going to hurt them this season. Obviously, it's working out for him in Texas A&M. He wasn't the problem. Whatever it was in Florida State, they couldn't figure it out, so they thought, we'll just get rid of him. So,
All right, and then Jeremy had the Texas Longhorns over Tulsa. Of course, that one was a little closer than I thought. Texas losing the first week to Maryland. That one not surprising me as much, but the fact Texas wasn't able to completely manhandle Tulsa, a little surprising. Although Tulsa's known for having a high-powered offense at the same time.
It's because to show you can't overlook any opponent you go after.
Absolutely not. Just like Coach Till was talking about at the beginning of the show, that not only goes for the college level, but the high school level as well. Yeah. And then your upset pick, you finally missed one this week. You had Florida over, or not upset, rather locked in. You had Florida over Kentucky. Of course, this was the first time since I think I was almost a newborn that Kentucky beat them.
Yeah, of course I picked the one team that can't close it out after this long streak. So
it was like 12,000 days or something since Kentucky won, and you picked the one day. And then for upset alert, let's start with yours. So you actually got this one right again. You're back to back on upset alerts. You had Coastal Carolina over UAB.
Yeah, I mean Coastal Carolina, they traveled down into Birmingham, which they kind of just rebuilt their program a couple of years ago. But they were coming in as the favorites already. So Coastal Carolina had a kind of mediocre season last year, so I wasn't quite sure on them this season. But they got the job done, so good thing for me.
Yeah, Jeremy had University of Pittsburgh taking over Penn State, which just talking about Appalachian State, that could have been a good pick. Of course, Penn State and Nittany Lions ended up winning that one. And then my pick was Kansas State upsetting number 18 at the time, Mississippi State. I thought with Bill Snyder, Kansas State's always a team that is on in putting teams on upset alert. That one didn't happen. So, All right, let's wipe the slate clean. We're moving past week 2. Let's take a look at week 3. So the first game, which perhaps is the biggest this week, so let's start there. Number 12, LSU, heading to number 7, Auburn.
I've been looking forward to this game since last Saturday. I mean, these two teams are pretty big right now. They are big right now in the SEC West, and one of these two, this could be a deciding factor in who wins the West this season.
Sure.
Should Alabama lose to one of these two teams, it's going to come down to these two, or a three-way matchup. So it's going to be very interesting to watch this game. But I'm probably going to pick LSU on this one. I think that the momentum that they're having right now, it's just phenomenal. So I think that they're going to hit on all cylinders going down into Auburn.
So you're taking the Tigers.
I am.
All right, that kind
Taking
of
the Tigers over the Tigers.
Well, that's true. You're right. You're right. I forgot about that. That's kind of an upset a little bit, just because LSU's ranked lower than Auburn, and it's actually in Auburn. I was planning on taking the Auburn Tigers, and I'm going to stick with that. Simply because they're at home, and I think that could be the deciding factor. In betting lines, being at home gets you about 2 or 3 points favorite. I think that's all the difference we're going to see in this one. It's going to be very close. A lot of defense being played in this one. Could be one of those games we've seen in the past where the score is 14-10 or lower. I think this was going to come down to who's most powerful in the trenches, and I think that's going to be Auburn.
Whoever's got the best defense, that's going to be the game right there.
Yeah, who can control the line of scrimmage, I think, will be the biggest key in that game. Moving forward, number 17, Boise State, is heading to number 24, Oklahoma State. So the Broncos taking on the Cowboys. Who you got?
I'm going to probably say Boise State on this one. I think they've always had a good, strong team. They're kind of mid tier on the rankings, so I think that they can get the job done here going into Oklahoma.
I'm right there with you. I'm taking Boise State. Matter of fact, I wanted to make this my upset pick for this week, but both were ranked, so we thought we would take a pick at this one. Here's something I find interesting. Boise State is right now at number 17. So they're in the driver's seat, again, using that term, to get that group of 5, or group of 6, whatever, group of 5 I think it is, to get into the bowl series. 17 already this point of the season. If they can go in and beat Oklahoma State, wouldn't they be knocking on the top 10 already?
Exactly. Yeah, they would. I think they could be kind of the UCF of this season.
And that was my next question. If Boise State can go undefeated and work their way up into the top 10 this early in the season, is there a chance they could do what UCF didn't and get into the college football playoff?
I think so, because UCF, they didn't play a lot of strong opponents last season that they beat. So Boise State, if they go undefeated, they got Oklahoma State for 1 on their record. I'm not sure what they're playing this season, but I'm sure they got a lot of tough teams coming up. So if they can win out the rest of the season, I think that they are definitely going to be, if anything, they'll be 5th. But I think with a couple of one-loss teams being up there at the end of the season, they'll jump over and get that.
Yeah, and it could be the perfect storm for them, because teams in the SEC, like LSU and Auburn, Alabama, could beat up on one another.
A lot of those the SEC championship with Georgia.
A lot of those teams in the Big Ten could beat up on one another. So it could be a scenario where we see finally a team outside of the Power 5 get into the college football playoff. And I'm fine with that, actually. Yeah. If you're one of the best 4 teams, you're one of the best 4 teams, no matter what conference you play in. Moving on, number 1, Alabama, heading to Ole Miss down in Oxford, Mississippi. Let me guess, you're taking Bama.
No doubt about it. I mean, Ole Miss have given Alabama some kind of, they gave them a run for their money a couple of times, and they even beaten them a couple of times.
Yeah, they beat them before. Yeah.
I think maybe the last 5 years they beat them twice. So Ole Miss is kind of a threat, but I'm still going to stick with Alabama on this one.
I'm the same way. I mean, I'm going to pick Bama until proven otherwise. You'd almost be stupid not to take them, right? Even on the road at Ole Miss. I mean, to me, it's almost a no-brainer. Moving on, number 4, Ohio State is playing TCU, who's ranked number 15. Now, this one is a neutral site. They're not actually going to be at TCU, but tough matchup for Ohio State, right?
Yeah, considering the fact that they don't have their head coach with them. This is the last week that they won't have their head coach. So, I think without Urban Meyer being there, I think this could be, I guess, maybe an upset. So I'm going to go with TCU.
All right, really?
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll take the Buckeyes just because I know Urban's not there yet. But the athletes are, and I don't expect them to skip a beat. I said this when we found out that Urban was getting suspended for 3 games. I said it won't matter. When he comes back, he'll come back to being 3-0. So, last one here, a big rivalry. Of course, if you remember, this was ranked the number 1 college game of all time back when the BCS was going on. That was USC versus Texas, and they're matching up once again this year. USC coming in number 22 off of that loss to Stanford, but USC at Texas. Who you got?
I'm going to go with Texas on this. No, actually, I'm going to go with USC. I think that they've got the more potential to win this game. Texas has been kind of a little mediocre to start off the season, so I'm going to have to go with USC.
I'm going to have to take the Trojans, too, just because of what you just said. We saw Texas lose to Maryland the first game of the season. We saw them beat Tulsa, but not very convincingly. I think USC comes in fresh off of that loss, motivated and ready to win. So, all right, let's do our let's start with Locked In. Who you got for this week?
I've got Oregon over San Jose State. I think Oregon can just kind of blow this another way. Plus, after what happened with me last week, I kind of want to go a little more easier on the route here.
You did that to yourself, Russell.
Yeah.
Justin Herbert, of course, the quarterback for Oregon. Not only some Heisman hype around him, but could be the top quarterback taken next year in the draft. So that's a good pick. I'm taking number 19 Michigan at Michigan against SMU. So Southern Methodist has had a tough schedule so far. They've already played a couple of good teams. They played TCU last week and got beat. Mm-hmm. I would imagine something that's going to continue when they head to the Big House. Now, upset alert.
I've got Iowa State over Oklahoma.
Really?
Yeah, I think that this could be the game that Oklahoma is going to overlook a little bit here. Iowa State, they have a decent football program, and I think that they have a decent one enough to get the job done against Oklahoma.
And we see this all the time, especially in the Big 12, where these teams, it's basically nobody plays defense and whoever scores last. And Iowa State was ranked last year for a good bit of the season, so that would definitely be an upset either way. I'm going to take Utah over number 10 Washington for my upset alert. Washington's ranked number 10, but it's at Utah. And doing some research, I didn't realize this, but Utah has the number 1 ranked defense in the nation.
Oh, wow.
So Washington got a feel for a good defense when they played Auburn. Yeah. And just a couple of quick stats here. The Utes are the nation's only team allowing an average of fewer than 150 total yards per game, and they're only one of 4 FBS squads to have allowed fewer than 17 points through 2 games. Now, that is against FCS teams Weber State and Northern Illinois of the MAC. But nonetheless, you still got to go out there and play the game, right? So I'm taking Utah to beat Washington. So I do want to mention, of course, there are some games here because of the hurricane that have been moved or have been canceled. So let me pull those up for you. Obviously, UCF was supposed to play North Carolina this week. Yep. It's probably a blessing in disguise that this one got moved.
Also, ECU's canceled their game with Virginia Tech.
Yep.
So that game will not be happening.
Yeah, so ECU was supposed to head to Blacksburg Saturday. That one's been canceled. West Virginia was supposed to be heading to Raleigh to play NC State, which I thought would have been a great game. Unfortunately, that one's been canceled. And as I mentioned, UCF was supposed to come into Chapel Hill. That one's been canceled as well.
Now, I heard that the Hurricanes are going to be sweeping through North Carolina. So I had to throw that one out there.
Take 2. And then finally, before we move on, we like to do our big man on campus, our top performers for the week. Who you got?
I've got Kyler Murray. I think, him being the quarterback of Oklahoma, he's starting to step up now, taking that role that he is in now. So I think he can do well going forward.
And obviously he had some big shoes to fill in Baker Mayfield. And I was reading up on Kyler. He actually scored, I think it was 5 total touchdowns, 3 in the air, 2 on the ground. So big game for him. My big man on campus, Jonathan Taylor, running back for Wisconsin. A lot of Heisman hype around him. I know this was against New Mexico, but nonetheless, he still ran for 253 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. So big man on campus.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's it for college football. So what's the score right now as far as picks?
I can't quite tell off the top of my head, but I believe I might be in the lead still. I'm not sure.
Anyway, yeah, I think it's very close though, as we tallied it up earlier. But that's going to do it for college football talk. We'll come back next week just like we have been and look at the picks. Take a look at the picks for the week following that and everything else that comes with college football. So we're going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the NFL. Of course, first week in the books. All that and more when we come back to the RO Sports Show.
At Kyocera, we see your company differently. We see your documents, how they're accessed, what it takes to keep them secure, and how well your workflow is flowing.
Kyocera helps your entire document infrastructure run more efficiently, securely, and cost-effectively.
And what we see is an opportunity to integrate all of it.
welcome back to the RO Sports Show, brought to you by First Health Orthopedics. Time to move up a level and head to the NFL. So we made a lot of picks last week with it being week 1. We're going to narrow that down to a couple of local teams and then a big matchup for this week. But in the meantime, I've got some NFL topics that I want to discuss with you. First of all, Le'Veon Bell, who, by the way, is on my fantasy team, of course. But he has been sitting out for the Steelers. Sat out the first week. He actually sacrificed a $835,000 paycheck. Doesn't seem to care, but he wants a new deal. So Steelers said, all right, we'll just play James Conner in your place. James Conner ends up scoring 2 touchdowns. My question is, should Le'Veon Bell, as one of the top running backs in the league, should he be worried about losing his job?
I would say so. If you got somebody who can step up and take the opportunity, I think Le'Veon is going to have to look at it and say, hey, look, I just need to go and take what I'm already being given so I can go out there and continue to play. Or he may go somewhere else and find the money that he wants. So that could very well happen.
Well, we saw something similar with Khalil Mack, who was with the Raiders. He wanted money. They didn't want to pay him, so they traded him to the Bears, and he absolutely killed it against the Packers. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But there is a chance, I guess, maybe the Steelers could say, you know what, we're just going to move on because James Conner's giving us the same kind of production. Now, you don't know if you're going to get that because Le'Veon is an established entity in the NFL. But they may say, hey, let's trade him. We'll get at least one good draft pick back because it is Le'Veon Bell. And I think that's a scenario we could see. However, I think right now, Le'Veon needs to be a little bit worried because obviously, look, if you can skip a almost $900,000 paycheck, then more power to you. But I would have had my butt out there on the field, So if you can continue to look, we don't know how long this is going to go on. I mean, the Steelers and Le'Veon are icy at best, relationship-wise. But if James Conner continues to produce like this, they may say, you know what, we don't need you anymore. We'll kick you to the curb and trade you. And that may be what's best for everybody. And we've talked about Le'Veon quite a bit on this show, and I fully expected him to play this year, but then be gone after that, unless they tag him again, which is what they're trying to do now, and he's just not having it. So, and we see this all the time, though, where these players will sit out and sit out and sit out. Now, he has until, I think it's week 10 or all the way to week 11. If he sits out past that point, then he doesn't get paid at all. He loses, like, millions of dollars. Do you think we get to that point?
So he's got maybe, 10 weeks left?
He's got a few months.
Yeah, so he's going to have to seriously consider start playing here as soon as possible. I think the Steelers got a good running back now, so I don't think they're going to need him as much anymore. So, he's definitely going to have to make a decision here.
Yeah.
It's going to be his, not the Steelers.
Absolutely. I mean, he's got some time now, but what's going to hurt him, I think, is other teams will look at this. Like, the players on his own team are mad at him because it's like, look, we have games now. It's time to show up and forget about the whole money thing. Mm-hmm. If he's not careful, he's going to alienate himself not only from the Steelers but from other teams that say, this guy's a diva and he's going to be distracting in the locker room. And I think you can make a case for that. Look at Dez Bryant. He's still hanging out there because of stuff just like that. So I have to wait and see. I mean, Le'Veon, man, please come back because I know you're a good player and you're my number 1 pick in my fantasy team. I need you to come get me points, man.
How are you doing in that, by the way?
I'm 1-0.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I scored the second most points last week, even without Le'Veon. So, but still, I'll need him down the line. Now, let's move on. Chiefs offense. They let Alex Smith go, traded him to my Washington Redskins, which I wasn't happy about because I wanted us to keep Kirk Cousins, who, of course, signed with the Minnesota Vikings. But going back to the Chiefs offense, Patrick Mahomes was a rookie last year. This is going to be his first full year as the starter. A lot of people had some questions. I, however, should get credit for this because I remember saying that I think Mahomes is going to have a big year, and I'll be darned if he didn't throw it all around the field on Sunday. So you think big things are coming for the Chiefs this year?
I think so. I think they're going to have to definitely be looked at by the entire NFL, all the teams that are going to be watching them because they got a good quarterback and they got a good team overall. I think the Chiefs can definitely make some noise going on, maybe early on. How they do throughout the rest of the season is going to be questionable, but I think the next 5 weeks or so, they're going to be pretty set.
And last week when we were doing predictions, I had the Chiefs making the playoffs. I also had the Chargers making the playoffs and going to the Super Bowl, and the Chiefs beat the Chargers this week. Now, both teams put up astronomical numbers on offense. Wasn't much defense played. But you see a lot of that in the AFC West, especially with these two teams. They're going to gunsling it. Mahomes is one of those guys, reminds me of Brett Favre. Not comparing him to Brett Favre, but reminds me of Favre, where he's got a cannon. He'll sling it in there to a spot that's no bigger than this. Sometimes he hits the nail on the head. Sometimes he misses and there's a pick. And we've seen that happen from him too, where in a preseason game he threw like 4 picks or something. So there are some learning curves, some pains, but I expect big things from Patrick Mahomes moving forward. Speaking of quarterbacks and replacing them, Jameis Winston, of course, is Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback, is serving a suspension for all that stuff with the Uber driver. We won't get into that now. But Ryan Fitzpatrick, who is a journeyman, has played for every team in the NFL, it seems like, that he came in and absolutely killed it. So talking about guys losing their spot, Jameis Winston, should he lose his spot at quarterback?
I mean, if the better guy is, this guy coming up and taking his place, he's going to take the place and he's going to be the guy. So, I mean, Jameis Winston, whatever's going on with him right now, he's going to have to continue to deal with that until after it's blown over. So, as of right now, I say the new guy stepping in is going to stay there.
Here's the thing, though. Fitzpatrick is my age, at least, which is not old, but is getting up there for the NFL,
Yeah.
36. He might even be closer to 40 by this point. So he's obviously not the future at quarterback. And that's why I think eventually, even though Winston continues to make mistakes off the field, he's going to get another chance because he's supposed to be the franchise quarterback for them. So if Fitzpatrick continues to put numbers like this up, which I don't necessarily think that he will, they were playing the Saints, and just like that Chiefs-Chargers game, there was absolutely no defense play. Matter of fact, Drew Brees is my starting quarterback, and in that game was the reason I won this week because nobody stopped anybody from scoring. But moving on, so the Bills, Buffalo Bills, the poor Bills, they played the Ravens this week, and it was a lot to a little. It was like 45-3 or something like that. So it wasn't even worth watching. But my question for you is: are the Bills the worst team in the league now? Have the Browns given up that title?
Maybe so. I mean, the Browns. I can't recall if they won their game, didn't they?
Actually, they tied.
They tied
with Pittsburgh.
So they're on the up and up now.
Yeah, it's not a loss.
No. So I think the Bills. I guess they're going to kind of take that spot now at this point. So I've never really seen them as a strong team, at least not in recent memory. So
Well, last year they literally backed into the playoffs, and I mean they made the playoffs. So of course, kudos to them. But besides LaShawn McCoy in the backfield, there are a lot of holes up and down the Buffalo Bills roster. I fully expect them to go 2-14, 3-13, something like that. It's going to be a long year for Buffalo fans. So perhaps the Browns are on the way up, like you said, because you only got one way to go from 0-16. We're also going to bring that up later on in Love It or Hate It about the Browns and their victory fridge, which we talked about before. Now, of course, Sunday night game was the Bears and Packers. Aaron Rodgers got hurt, like pretty bad, hurt his ankle. Ended up coming out from some of the game, comes back in. At that point, the Bears have been dominating with Khalil Mack, as I mentioned earlier. Of course, Aaron Rodgers comes in and does what Aaron Rodgers does, and the Packers end up winning. But how important is it to have Aaron Rodgers on the field?
Very important. Whatever team that you've got him on, I think is going to be very important. But with him being a Packers, pretty much loyal to the Packers at this point. So for the Packers, to have always relied on Aaron Rodgers, it's going to be very difficult for them moving forward if he's not able to play this coming up week. I know it's kind of questionable right now. So how they do going forward, it's going to be very interesting to see how they do without him if it comes down to that.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but I'm not even sure who their backup is because they traded Hundley, who was their backup in the offseason, and then of course they gave Rodgers this massive deal, which I think he deserved. I mean, you can make a case, and I would, that he's the best quarterback in the league. And you could see exactly what he means to the Packers this past week. When he came in, they were down and out, and they literally, he just put the ball wherever he wanted to on one leg, basically.
Yeah.
So, of course, kudos also to his offensive line for protecting him as much as they could, even though he got hurt. But, I think it's fair to say that the Packers go as Aaron Rodgers goes.
Okay.
So we're going to do a prediction on that next game, and that's going to have a lot to do with whether Aaron Rodgers plays or not. Moving on, so of course the Cowboys were playing the Panthers this week, and you picked the Cowboys, and you were wrong. Panthers ended up winning against Dallas, thank goodness. Sorry for all you Cowboy fans out there, but I think
you're not sorry.
No, I think one of the biggest stories out of this though is that the Panthers tight end Greg Olsen got hurt and is out for at least the moment for a few weeks. So how important is it to Cam Newton to have that security blanket be gone now?
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult. And the offensive line's kind of always been a thing that Panthers have struggled with.
There've been a lot of injuries on their line too.
Yeah, so going forward, I think it's going to be just another big challenge for them to try and get over it and continue on. I don't know how it will affect them, certainly. The question is, it's not who they're playing against. If they got somebody with a big defense, they're going to hurt badly. If it's somebody who's kind of mediocre on that defensive line, they're going to be okay.
Yeah, I agree. They've still got some weapons. Cam Newton, whether you like him or not, is a weapon on his own. He can throw it, he can run, but still, when you're in the red zone, a tight end of Greg Olsen's caliber, not having him there you're going to notice it. Especially me, because he was also on my fantasy team. And I hate to keep bringing it up, but daggone it, man. And then one more thing. I got to bring up the Redskins because congratulations to them. They beat the tires off of Arizona Cardinals by running the ball. Adrian Peterson, I was a little skeptical about this, but he came in and had a great game. Still got some left in the tank, it seems like.
Yeah, I think the Redskins are going to have a good season this year. I think they'll even make it into the playoffs. That's how good I think they'll have it.
I hope you're right.
That might be a little too much wishful thinking, but I think they can do it.
Yeah, I hope you're absolutely right. I remember the first Raw show that we ever did. That was a topic, was Alex Smith getting traded to my Redskins. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I said, I don't like it. I would rather have Kirk Cousins. And that part still rings true for me. But what you get with Alex Smith is he's a great game manager. And sometimes, you want your team to throw it around. But if you've got a good defense and a good running game, then all you need is a quarterback that protects the ball, doesn't turn it over, hands it off when he needs to, throws it when he needs to. Alex Smith can throw. People forget that. And that's what makes a lot of times a Super Bowl contender. Now, I don't know that necessarily that's what they are. I would like to see us make the playoffs. I think it's very possible. And go Redskins.
Yeah.
Now, let's take a look at some picks here. So, Carolina Panthers are heading to Atlanta. Big matchup inside of the NFC South. It's going to be 1 o'clock on Sunday. We just talked about Greg Olsen not being there. Atlanta's a good team, even though they lost this week last Thursday, against the Eagles. But who are you taking?
I'm going to go with the Falcons on this one. I know I'm two picks now over the Panthers.
Yeah.
But I think the Falcons can get this turn done. They're going into Georgia. I don't see them getting out of that.
I'm with you, man. I mean, I would, being in the Carolinas, people might get upset with us for not picking the Panthers, but I just quite frankly think the Panthers going to Atlanta, like you just mentioned, Matt Ryan is still Matt Ryan. I mean, he didn't have a great game last week, but still, that was the first game of the season. Everybody has kinks to work out. I think that Atlanta's able to hold strong at home because the main reason being Greg Olsen's not going to be there. And I think that's going to have a lot to do with it, especially since the Panthers don't really have a number one wide receiver. I know Torrey Smith got a lot of play, Devin Funchess got a lot of play, but neither one of those guys are a number one receiver. Greg Olsen is almost your number one guy, and he's gone now.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, on the other side, Julio Jones still firm with Calvin Ridley. So two Bama boys there ready to catch the ball. By the way, Calvin Ridley, also on my fantasy team. Play him. Moving on, so my Washington Redskins, as we just mentioned, Indianapolis, the Colts are heading up to D.C. That's also a 1 o'clock game. Who are you taking?
I'm going to have to go with the Redskins on this one. I mean, the Colts, they're a pretty good team, but I think the Redskins can get this here done, not being biased on that one, but I really do think that Redskins are going to have a good season this year. So.
I agree. I mean, people are going to be like, why are you not picking the Panthers, but you're picking your team? Again, I do all this. I promise I do it with my head. My heart sometimes, but mostly my head. Indianapolis, of course, Andrew Luck is back now, but he's been off for over a year now. So you don't really know what you're getting with him coming back from the shoulder surgery like he did, a shoulder injury. Washington really impressed me last week. If they're able to run the ball like they did against Arizona, against Indianapolis, I foresee another victory for the Redskins. So HTTR. And then another big game this week, Minnesota at Green Bay. That is also 1 o'clock on Sunday. So big matchup inside the NFC North. Who you got?
And, with what we were talking about earlier with Aaron Rodgers potentially not making this game here, I'm going to say he doesn't make this game. I think he's going to sit out a week or two for this ankle injury. So I'm going to say Minnesota's actually going to be on this one.
Oh, this is tough because I want to say that he'll play even if he's kind of hurt because they'll just inject him with whatever that stuff is, the cortisone shots or whatever it is that they give him.
If he does play, Green Bay all the way.
Yeah, see, I don't know if it's all the way, but yeah, I would take in Lambeau. I would take that. By the way, I don't know if you saw this, but the post-game interview with Aaron Rodgers, he was a little loopy, so they had already given him something to ease the pain. I would imagine that if he can play, he will play. Of questionable, can go either way, and that's one of the things I hate with fantasy is you don't know whether the guy's going to play till last minute, and by that point it's too late.
The issue I see that this is early on in the season. They can get by with a couple of losses if they need to make sure that he's 100% for when it gets down to games that are going to count.
Yeah. On the flip side of that coin, though, to play devil's advocate, this is a conference game against the team that you're more than likely going to be fighting to win against at the end of the season. So I get the point you're trying to make. If they were playing another team outside of the conference, I'd say forget it. Don't start Rodgers. It's not worth it. But because this is against Minnesota, the team that you are slated to be battling against towards the end of the year, this could be a deciding factor, even though it's only in week 2. So, but you're going to take the Packers, assuming that Rodgers plays, or you're going to go the other way?
Honestly, I don't think he's going to play this week, so I'm going to go with Minnesota.
All right. I'm with you. I know that ESPN right now has it about 60% chance that the Packers win. I'm with you. If Rodgers plays, I'm taking the Packers, but I don't think he's going to play either. And everything that I just said on the other side of that, I wouldn't risk it either this early in the season. You've still got plenty of time to make that up. So I'm going to take the Kirk Cousins and Captain Kirk and the Vikings. So there you go. Well, that's going to do it for NFL Talk. We're going to move on in the next segment after we go to commercial and talk some NASCAR. Of course, big news here in Rockingham with our own Speedway. We'll talk about that and much more when we come back to the RO Sports Show.
Willow Tree Antiques and Gifts is all about rustic home decor and gifts. You will always find a variety of unique antiques, vintage, and new items in our shop. Come and see our selection of housewarming, new baby, and wedding gifts. For the man in your life, we have many collectibles, Boker knives, and leather. And ladies love the jewelry, purses, candles, hats, and t-shirts. We also offer a 30-day layaway program. Come and experience shopping at Willow Tree Antiques and Gifts.
Welcome back to the RO Sports Show. As always, brought to you by First Health Orthopedics. Let's move to the racetrack. Of course, last week you had that big interview with Joseph Lombard from NASCAR on YouTube, and we actually talked about Brad Keselowski winning during that race, and he's at it again in Indianapolis, right?
Yeah, back-to-back wins for the 2-car, and of course, both races were very significant wins for him and for his team. First of all, Darlington winning that race, first time he's ever won at Darlington. Big race to win the Southern 500. Then, of course, this past weekend was Indianapolis, and he won there, which is really significant for Team Penske because Roger Penske has never won at Indianapolis in NASCAR. So he's won almost any other way at Indianapolis.
I was about to say, I find that a little surprising. But.
Yeah. So, big props to Penske and Keselowski getting it done. Eric Jones and Denny Hamlin, two Toyotas finishing 2 and 3. Harvick finishing 4th, Clint Boyer running out top 5. You don't see Kyle Busch very far down, but he was kind of dominant for the most part of the day. Him and Kevin Harvick kind of up at the front. Martin Truex Jr., of course, the round at the big 3, he actually wrecked out early in the race. So towards the end of it, Brad Keselowski got it done, and so huge momentum going into the playoffs.
I guess Truex didn't take the news well that he's going to have to find a new sponsor next year.
It must have not gone too well for him there, but it was a pretty tough day for the 78 team for sure.
In this race, anybody surprise you?
Seeing Eric Jones at the very top like he did, I thought that was pretty cool to see him up there. Clinton Boyer, who actually hates this racetrack, not in general, but when he goes there to race, he hates racing it because he's always been terrible at it. But this is actually the first time since, I think, 2003 that NASCAR never had any practice or any qualifying pre-race. So the entire race was done just off of notes before they even got to the track because rain washed out most of it, and they raced on Monday. So, they had nothing to go on other than what they could do during the race. So Clinton Boyer done pretty well in that regard, finishing top 5. So, of course, getting a stage win as well. So, I think that's pretty significant there as well.
Another thing that I'm noticing looking at the top people here is there's a lot of Fords, a lot of Toyotas, only one Chevrolet.
And that is Jamie McMurray, who's actually not going to be racing in that one car after this year. He's going to be taken out of that car. I'm not quite sure who's taking it over, but I know he's moving out. So, I'm not quite sure what's up with the Toyotas this week. Ryan Newman got top 10. He usually does well at Indianapolis anyway, so it's not a surprise there. And the next one will be Kyle Larson at 14th. So, Chevrolet was not too well at all at Indianapolis this week.
Yeah. Is there any correlation between the type of car you have and the racetrack itself?
The kind of the way that they're built, the way that wind flows through them, the aerodynamics kind of plays a factor in. Of course, that's something that we've all been kind of looking at with the way Chevrolet has these new kind of bodies on their cars this year with the Camaros. So that might play a factor in. I mean, there's a lot that goes into these cars other than just the way they look on the outside as well. But for the most part, I think it's just kind of an issue with the manufacturers trying to figure that out themselves. So,
all right. Now, Indy's in the books, and the playoffs have begun. So, where are we headed to next?
Well, we are heading all the way out to Las Vegas. We've got a big race going on out there. It is the start of the playoffs. So, a lot going on then. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this race goes. It's a day race. It's going to be very hot.
Yeah.
But Vegas has not usually been this late in the season, so it's going to be very interesting to see how this race plays out. Because it definitely races differently from now and then it does at like week 3 of the season. So
now, real quick, you want to take a stab at who you think is going to win?
I like Brad Keselowski's chances, not only because he's on a roll, but because he's also done well at Vegas. So I think that he can be the one to win this. Of course, I would also say Kevin Harvick will be a factor in this one as well, considering he won it the last time we were here. So I'm going to go with one of those two, but I'm going to stick with the double deuce. Or, excuse me, just the deuce.
Yeah, Keselowski, 3 in a row would be impressive for sure. Of course, Harvick kind of knows what that's about. He started the season off winning, what was it, 3 out of 4? Something like that. Now, looking at the playoff standings.
The playoffs are here.
Yes, so let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so I'm going to run down the names right quick. So we got Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., Brad Keselowski, Clint Bowyer, Joey Logano, Kurt Busch, Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, Eric Jones, Austin Dillon, Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, Eric Almirola, Jimmy Johnson, and Alex Bowman. That's your round of 16. 4 of those drivers after the next 3 races will have an elimination, and the bottom 4 are going to be knocked out. So we're looking at a lot of these drivers at the bottom already, which would be Hamlin, Almirola, Johnson, and Bowman. Those guys could be the ones to be out first. It all depends on how things go for them. But kind of looking at the the playoff points, they're kind of tied up, so it's really tight at the bottom. So maybe within 5 or 6 points of one another. They got to get above the 13th cutoff point playoff standing. So if they can do that, they'll be good to go.
I do find it interesting, though, that Jimmy Johnson was able to get in. A lot of people have been talking about how, it's over for him. He's at the tail end of his career, and that may be true. Is there any chance, though, that he's able to move on?
I think so. I mean, looking at some of these guys, they're only 5 points ahead of them, 3 points ahead of them. The interesting thing for me is that Kyle Larson's so far down, but he's only got 5 playoff points to his name. So Jimmy Johnson can very well make it up in the next couple races. He's done well at Las Vegas. Can't quite tell you what's coming up afterwards. I believe, it's Richmond and Charlotte, which is the Roval, which we'll be going to. So it's a wild card race of its own there. Richmond could very well be a Toyota race there. I think Kyle Busch probably get out there done. I don't think Jimmy Johnson will win any of these races coming up, but I think he can at least survive to the next round.
He can at least place high enough to continue.
Yeah.
All right, so we've talked about the big 3 all season long. Outside of those 3, who do you think has the best chance at actually winning this whole thing?
I think Brad Keselowski now at this point has a lot of momentum. I would have said Kyle Larson before Brad won the race. And me and Joseph actually talked about this last week, where it was kind of tossed up between those 2 drivers. But I think Keselowski has the momentum. He's been showing a lot of speed the past couple of last weeks prior to winning the race. So I think that he can be the one. He's actually sitting right now in 4th as far as the playoff standings go. So he's already kind of sitting there nice and pretty, so we'll see how it goes from here.
All right, so the playoffs have begun, and we'll definitely be keeping track of that, or more so Russell will, as we move further and further and see who he whittles it down to.
I'm going to release my own playoff grid. It's going to be on the Sports Show Facebook page prior to the Las Vegas race, so if I make all the predictions, and I'll see if I'm right on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, go on there and tell us who you think will be moving on. So, finally, for the NASCAR segment, of course, we've got some news right here in Richmond County, specifically in Rockingham, dealing with our own Speedway. There's finally been some moves made. So
yeah, well, Rockingham Speedway was purchased a couple weeks ago, and now it's been renamed to the Rock Entertainment Complex. So what's going to happen here is we got a lot of cool stuff about to happen with this race. The owners, they want to have something going on there every single week, and they want to include racing, but I also want to do other stuff like concerts.
Sure.
Of course, Carolina Rebellion will be coming back here. They got a 20-year contract on that. So I'm really excited about what Rockinham's going to have coming very soon. I'm really I got a lot of high hopes for these new owners. I think they can definitely revive the Rock, and that's kind of how they're going with the whole motto there, that they're going to bring it back. I'm very excited. They're actually doing a lot more social media stuff too, so that's going to be a big factor because the last owner, they didn't have that social media there. So having that social media platform is going to elevate the recognition that they're going to be able to see them every single day.
Yeah, the track has changed hands a few times since NASCAR was here last, and it just seems like the feeling and the excitement is palpable way more than it has been in the last 10 years. And I think that's because of this group that's come in, based out of Raleigh, by the way.
Yeah, nightclub owners.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, so they know entertainment. And I think if you're, obviously you want to have racing there, but if you can't, as we've mentioned before, there are other things that you can do with these kind of complexes. And from what I've read, they're going to try to model it after one that's similar, I think in Las Vegas, I think is what I read, where they race there, but they also have other events, concerts, other kind of entertainment things. So I'm with you. I'm excited, and I expect big things for our own speedway. Let me ask you a question, though, before we go to the next segment. Is there a chance? I know that NASCAR there's been some contact there. Is there any chance you think that NASCAR comes back?
Well, that question can only be answered in 2020 when the contracts for the other racetracks end and they have to renew those. NASCAR, that means that they've got 2 years, a little less than 2 years, to get that track ready to go for a NASCAR race. So I'm not sure if that's possible. Now, depending on how fast they get through that, I think it is. But NASCAR has a lot of rules and regulations on how these tracks got to look and how they have to be for safety reasons. So that's going to have to be the factor there. I think for sure that they could very well see it back one day, but maybe not in the near future. Yeah, and that's not something that they should work on right now. I think there's other things that they can work on before they get to NASCAR.
Right, and obviously a lot of people here in Richmond County, when this news broke, that was one of the first things they said. Oh, is it going to be NASCAR? Is it going to be NASCAR? And my initial reaction was more than likely not, just because it's been gone for so long. But, hearing this renewed vigor among the owners that bought it, at this point, the sky is the limit, I feel like. Yeah. So I'm with you. I'm excited. Big things are happening in Rockingham.
And bringing up the community, one thing that we need to do as Richmond County is come around these guys and support them and show that we are very, very glad about it. Because for me personally, I am just, I'm not sure what the word is, but I'm very, very happy that they're coming, that they're going to work on bringing the racetracks. I want to make sure that the rest of the county, they're going to show their support, and you don't have to go to the events to not. Going to the events will support it, but you can also support it without having to do that. If it's not your thing, you can still, help them promote it a little bit. So, that's what I'm going to have to say.
And that was another beef that I had was, everybody kept saying, oh, I can't believe NASCAR moved out and, hurt our economy, and that part's true. But the same people, I don't know if the exact same people, but a lot of the people that were like, why did NASCAR leave? It was like nobody went to the race. People here in Richmond County, and I'm even guilty of it. I would sometimes get out of town because it was such a circus here. But, if you want something like that's that financially viable to stay here, you have to patronize it. And it goes with anything else, any other business,
You gotta have some pride with it.
Exactly. But again, I think that the excitement in the environment revolving around this right now is as high as it can be, and I'm, along with you, very excited, as are many, many people right here in Richmond County. So, it's like everything else. We will keep an eye on that and wait and see when they start developing that property out there, and I expect big things from the group. So, the Rock Sports, or I almost said sports
it's
complex,
the Rock Entertainment Complex.
Entertainment Complex. So, big things coming to Richmond County. That's going to do it for our NASCAR segment. When we come back, we're going to finish the show the same way we always do. We've got our big impacts of the week. Take a look at the Ross poll, whether you think Larry Fedora should get canned. And, of course, love it or hate it, all that more when we come back to the RO Sports Show. Welcome back to the RO Sports Show, brought to you by First Health Orthopedics, and we're going to finish up the same way we always do. Let's start with our big impacts for the week instead of the week. Of course, this is brought to you by Richmond Community College, whose motto is Local College, Big Impact. But we're doing a hurricane edition today. So what's your big impact for everybody?
Hurricane Florence is coming through, and it's definitely going to make a big impact here in the Carolinas and some of Georgia and Virginia. So going through with that, Florence is going to be a major storm. It's going to come right for us. So no matter which way it's going to veer off to the north or to the south, it's still going to cause a lot of issues. And not only for people on the coastline, but even people who are having these sports programs going on. They're canceling games left and right because of the storm. People want to seek shelter and all of that. So it's going to be a rough time for everybody here.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to mention that as of right now, we're expecting to get anywhere from 10 inches of rain to, 2 feet of rain. I mean, it could be anywhere in there. So with that in mind, I just want to let people know to be prepared. Do not leave your house unless you absolutely have to, unless it's some sort of emergency, because it only takes an inch of water for your car to go moving on its own. And obviously a lot of people get injured and sometimes die over something like that. So
I don't know if you've seen Tuesday night, but Tuesday night Senator Tom McInnes,
I saw that,
and Sheriff Clemens here in Richmond County, they were kind of together explaining to people, don't ask for 911 if you're not going to be the people who's going out to evacuate. There are shelters that you can go to if you need to. So definitely.
I know Richmond Senior is going to be one of those places, what they talked about. I want to say that Place of Grace, which is in the former Robertdale School, will also be housing people if need be. Of course, as Tom McInnes alluded to, that's for people that live in trailers, people that live in low-lying places, seniors, those that if your power goes out, you might be in some trouble. So, of course, everybody make sure to stay safe out there. I think as of right now, we're expecting this to come in sometime tomorrow. Again, this thing is just sitting out there, and unfortunately, what may happen is once we get it, it may sit on top of the Carolinas for the whole weekend. So again, flooding could be an issue, probably will be an issue. You can pretty much mark your book to that. So again, folks, if you're watching this, make sure, stay safe. Don't do anything stupid. Make sure you've got batteries, candles, something to do if the power goes out. Make sure you've got plenty of gas, plenty of non-perishable food items, and make sure to stay safe. So moving forward, our Ross Poll, which, of course, you can be a part of every Monday night on the RO Sports Show's Facebook page. And this week, as we were talking about earlier, we asked you folks, Larry Fedora, the Tar Heels, not starting out well. Lost to California at Cali. Could make a case. Okay, fine. Then you're in state, you lose 41-19 to ECU. Is this going to be Larry Fedora's last year? And this surprised me a little bit, but 100%, and this was over multiple votes, 100% said he should be gone.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the surprise part. I think this was a very obvious thing. I think Tar Heel fans, they're sick of this. They're known. They want to be known as a winner.
Yeah.
Larry Fedora has not made them a winner at all this season. They haven't really made them that much of a winner last season. This has been mediocre for the Tar Heels. I'm not sure what they can do to get going again other than make a change. We've been saying this with other programs where players need to go and coaches need to go to make changes to make things work. This is a situation where Larry Fedora is not helping the Tar Heels. In fact, he's hurting them at this point. I know he made a comment at the ECU game prior to it saying that he doesn't remember a thing from the last game that they played. And it turns around and say, hey, here's a refresher for you. Yeah. So, maybe this is something that Tar Heels need to look at and say, hey, look, we need to go ahead and get rid of this guy because he's not doing his job.
Look, North Carolina is and always will be a basketball-first school.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. I mean, the prominence there for so many years has established that. However, UNC is one of those schools, a major school in a major conference. There is absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be good at football. Mm-hmm. They have the facilities. I mean, I've said this several times. The facilities, they have the booster money. We're in the South. They have the ability to recruit really good athletes. And I just, quite frankly, as we talked about earlier, the guys that Fedora has won with weren't his own guys. And so now that we've got a full team of just his guys, you see what kind of results we're getting. Now, I do want to say this. In his defense, of course, a lot of our players have been suspended because of that deal with selling the sneakers, the Jordans and all that. Now, some of those have been staggered. But nonetheless, if you want to be considered a not just a basketball school, but a school that is also good at football, you need to establish depth. Now, I'm not going to compare us to Alabama or Clemson, something like that, but you need to have some form of depth like that to where if you lose a guy or two, you have another guy to step up without losing a beat. North Carolina just simply doesn't have that. And quite frankly, whether it's knee-jerk or not reaction, maybe it's time for Fedora to move on.
I think where they can start at is by beating their in-state teams. NC State, Duke, ECU. Maybe you can throw in Appalachian State at that point. I'm not sure if you could, but those type of teams there, the ones that the fan base is going to be crazy about that. The most attention is going to be put on those games. I think that's where UNC needs to be focusing at for now, and then getting into these conference games, and then working on the out-of-conference games.
Yeah, and talking about the Hurricane, UCF was supposed to come to Chapel Hill this weekend, but UCF was coming in ranked 18th. Mm-hmm. I'd pretty much say that they were probably going to come in and beat us again, and now I'm starting to worry that UNC might not win a game all season. There might be one in there where we play like a Division II team towards the end of the year, but still, I mean, I would have thought that ECU game would have been not an automatic W, but at least a W where you pretty much thought they were going to be able to win, and it wasn't even close.
Yeah,
I think that's what surprised me. But again, as a Tar Heel fan, I would like to see us be good at football, but at this point, bring on basketball season. And then finally, let's finish it up with love it or hate it. We've got a couple funny ones we're going to save towards the end. Let's start with college basketball, as I just mentioned. So Rick Barnes, who is the reigning SEC Coach of the Year, just got a brand new deal at Tennessee. Now, the numbers haven't come out, but it'll keep him there until the year 23-24. Love it or hate it?
I'm going to say love it, and as much as I despise Tennessee, they got a great basketball team to begin with. So, I think they got a great future ahead. Maybe another SEC championship or two down the road. So, yeah, I say good job.
The same thing I was just saying about Carolina. I say the same thing for Tennessee. A big-time school with big-time facilities and a big-time conference. You should be good at football and basketball.
There was a time where Tennessee was pretty good at football.
Absolutely, when Philip Fulmer was there, but that was a long time ago. And they may be good again one day, and they should be. But it seems like right now they're more of a basketball school. Yeah. And I think the big reason is because of Rick Barnes, who is actually an ACC guy. He used to coach Clemson many, many years ago. But anytime you get paid, man, congratulations. So moving on. So Jordan Spieth, talking about golf, actually did not qualify for the Tour Championship, their playoffs.
I'm going to hate it. I love Jordan Spieth. I can't believe that he did not make this tournament, whether he was just having just one of them type of days or something like that. I mean, it happens to everybody, but I'm going to hate it because that's a big name not in a tour.
So what happened is the top 30 get in golf. Mm-hmm. He finished 31st.
Yeah. And
the reason that happened is this past weekend at the BMW Championship, he finished 54th overall. So he kind of shot himself in the foot a little bit. But I'm with you. Jordan Spieth is one of the bigger names, bigger guys in PGA. So it hurts the sport a little bit to not have him continue to move on because obviously you want to go and see the guys that you know and recognize. So I'm going to say hate that. Moving on. So Dartmouth, the school of football. I didn't realize Dartmouth had a football team, but they do. They're pretty smart, I guess. They added the first female full-time Division I coach. Now, she actually is what's called their offensive quality control. So it's not a coordinator or a head coach or anything, but still, the fact that Dartmouth has added the first female full-time Division I coach, love it or hate it.
I'm going to say love it. I mean, women know sports too.
Sure.
So, yeah, I'd say that if you got the talent for it, you should be hired for it.
I agree. I say love it. I mean, best man or woman for the job should get the job, even if it's football. And I think it's just a matter of time before we start seeing more of this across all sports. And again, diversity. If you're the best person for the job, I guess I should say, then it shouldn't matter whether you're man, woman, black, white, whatever. So, in college football, keeping with that, Texas A&M has knocked off Texas as the most valuable college franchise. I'll call them. Love it or hate it.
I'm going to say love it because Texas has definitely fallen off the past couple of years. Texas A&M, since the move to the SEC, they've been doing pretty well. Not the best, but they've been doing really well. They've been hanging in with some of those guys on the west side, so I think that's helped them out a lot, getting that recognition. And, I really like their thing of, 12th man. I think that's pretty cool stuff, so, yeah.
One of the reasons why Texas has been the most valuable for quite a while, they have their own ESPN network. I don't know if you know this, the Longhorn Network. Now, A&M doesn't have that. Of course, they do have the SEC network. But, yeah, now I understand how they were able to pay Jimbo so much money and upgrade Kyle Field and all of the facilities. Yeah. Is it because they're in the state of Texas, both of these, why they're 1-2, you think?
I think so. Maybe it has a lot to do with the fact that they're not too far away from Dallas either. That kind of helps it out as well.
Sure. Yeah, but I love this, I guess, but it just goes to show you college football and basketball is a business.
Oh, yeah.
You're talking about millions, actually billions across the whole country. Serena Williams, talking tennis, was cited, I'm sure plenty of people have seen this, was cited 3 times this past Saturday during the U.S. Open during her 6-2, 6-4 loss against Naomi Osaka. Ended up calling the ump a few names, including the word thief, and she got cited a couple times on some points there. So love it or hate it.
I'm going to say hate it because I think this is just really... I think this could have been handled a lot better by Serena. I'm not quite sure how she got cited, like exactly what it was for, but whatever it was, I think that could have really been handled off the field, and I think it could have been a lot better situation for her.
Look, this isn't the first time in tennis that a player has argued with the umpire. It's just like any other sport. You see this. However, it got heated. It got a little out of control. It was kind of unlike Serena to do this, so she must have had a legit reason. The thing I found funny was the fact that I don't even know what the name of the umpire was, but their association was upset this week because no one came out and defended the umpire. And I was like, you know what? Like, look, it's part of your job. Going in, there's a chance you may get yelled at. Just get over it and move on.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair right now is the Vegas favorite to main event next year's WrestleMania, which I think it's 35, right?
I think so, yeah. So I'm going to say love it because I think it's going to be cool to see. And personally, I'm not a fan of either two of these being in the main event if it's women. But I think the women having that main event. This is the main event, not just a match before the main event. This is the main event.
This is to main event the show of shows.
I think this would be a good matchup to begin with. I think that this would be cool. If they have this, if they both have. I know right now they're both on two different shows. So if they come together. Both champions. Hopefully, it won't be a unification of the two titles. Hopefully not, but I think it'll be a good match.
I absolutely love it. Rousey right now is the Raw Women's Champion. Flair, the SmackDown Women's Champion.
Until Sunday.
Well, we'll see. But I fully expect both of them to come into WrestleMania head on with both of these titles. I'm with you though. I don't want to see one where whoever wins gets both belts. That just doesn't make any sense. But the fact that they would come into the match with both belts, I think, would add to the hype. Also, the fact, and you're going to disagree with me, but Ronda Rousey comes in with her UFC background, so she brings in fans that otherwise might not be watching WWE to face who, again, you're going to disagree with me, is the best women's wrestler in the league. And probably the most prominent with her, her bloodline, Ric Flair. Everybody knows about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is just a match made in heaven, and I think it's about time that women main event at a WrestleMania.
Certainly.
Last two here. So Bud Light, remember we talked about this before, set up a Browns victory fridge at Cleveland bars all across the city. Said that they would open it up and give everybody free beer when the Browns won a game. Well, the Browns tied this Sunday, and Bud Light said, we ain't opening it.
I love it. It's not a victory. You got to get the victory. You're close.
Yeah.
But you're not quite there.
I agree. Victory means victory, fridge. Yep. So tie is a tie, even though I was surprised that they tied Pittsburgh. Even with Le'Veon Bell not being there, Cleveland's still Cleveland. But again, I think you picked them to make the playoffs this year.
So far it hasn't helped them, but it hasn't hurt them either. So
yeah, but hey, guess what? They won't go 0-16 again this year. That's impossible to do now.
As I said, it was, what is it, 0
It could
0-1 or something.
It could be 0-15-1.
Yeah.
But they're not losing 16 games. And then finally, this one's a crossover between baseball, football, and one of our friends here with the RO Sports Show. So Monday Night Football this week was the first Monday Night Football for the new season. One of the games was in Oakland. So they had a crew out there, ESPN as they do. They were set up in the Bay Area. They had a desk, all the guys talking. Lo and behold, there are 2 or 3 big heads of our man Scott Emerson in the background, to which he sent me a picture of it. I said, Scott, we will absolutely try to get that on the show for you. So Scott Emerson, big heads in Oakland on Monday Night Football. Love it or hate it?
I love it. That is really cool. You don't usually expect to see a coach being like that. So I think that's really awesome for him. I think that's going to get his name out there a little bit more.
Yeah, not even a coach. He's the pitching coach.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't have pictures of the head of the manager. They had pictures of Scott, the pitching coach, which I thought was great. I absolutely loved it. Speaking of that, Scott sent me a text a couple of days ago, was asking what they're saying about the hurricane here in Rockingham. I'm going to finish up with this. I said, as of right now, and this a couple of days ago, expected to hit us head on. He said, I heard more rain with heavy wind. I said, yeah, the wind's supposed to get up to like 80 miles an hour. Not good for a fastball, but strong for wind. So, but again, that's going to do it for this edition of the RO Sports Show. And I want to mention one more time, of course, everybody stay safe, stay indoors unless you have an emergency or absolutely have to leave. Make sure you're prepared. Today could be the last day to do that. So if you haven't done it yet, head out and do it now. Make sure to tie down anything that you got outside or bring it indoors so it doesn't fly, end up being debris that goes through somebody's window, something like that. Anyway, we hope everybody stays safe over the weekend. For Matt Harrelson, Russell Parker, we'll see you right back here next week at 5:30 on Thursday. Everybody have a great week.